right, welcome to the 2024 State of the Union preview right here on the First TV. Of course, we're going to bring you the State of the Union live, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here. Before we get going, though, I want to tell you about a little poll number. Let's focus on Iowa, all right? In 2020, the polls had Trump winning by 1.8. He ended up winning by 8.2. So that's a Biden bias of 6 points. Right now in Iowa, Trump's up by 15. So you add in the Biden bias from 2020, he's up 21 points. Let me just do one more, and then I'll tell you why I'm talking about this, why we start off with this. We'll do a swing state, Pennsylvania. The polling right before, November 2020, right before the vote, the polling had Biden up by 4.7. He only won by 1. So it's over 3-point Biden bias. Today, the polls in Pennsylvania have Trump up by 4. Add in the Biden bias, Trump's up by almost 8 points. Trump is up in every swing state by a lot. That's the state of the political situation right now. Biden is down by so much that Democrats are freaking out about it. But it's getting too late for them to execute any sort of plan B, unfortunately for them. Good for conservatives, good for Trump. And also you got Trump coming off his just domination of Super Tuesday. Almost a clean sweep of every single state for the first time in any Republican primary history, winning every single state except for Vermont. So Biden is here to take the spotlight away from Trump and away from the momentum that Trump clearly has right now and away from Biden's free fall with the State of the Union address. And I think I should say what we're all thinking right now. I'm actually pretty surprised he's even doing one. If he makes one slip up tonight, it's going to feed into a major concern that everyone has, including Democrats. Anyone with eyes can see that he is mentally unwell. So he better do better than that press conference a couple weeks ago. Remember the press conference? So a quick refresher on that. There was an investigation into Joe Biden's mishandling of classified documents. And the report came back and they're like, yeah, he mishandled documents. But we have to consider that at trial, if we were to charge him with a crime, Mr. Biden would present himself to a jury as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Jeez. He said it would be difficult to convince a jury that they should convict him by then a former president well into his 80s of a serious felony that requires a mental state of willfulness. Oof. So then Biden got up to the podium to alleviate fears of his mental acuity, and he got up there and just botched the whole thing. He confused the president of Egypt with the president of Mexico. It was brutal for him. He got angry. It wasn't good. So if he does anything like that tonight, then it's going to be a major problem for him. But maybe not. I don't know, right? Like not long ago, Biden gave that speech near Valley Forge, and they put him on whatever concoction of drugs that he needed, and it was just the right dose. And he was fired up, and he read the teleprompter really well. So maybe he'll read it great tonight, and everything will be fine. Or he'll trip and fall on the way down. I don't know. We'll see. That's the biggest reason why I'm watching. What is the State of the Union, though? We're going to ask that to each of our guests today, Josh Hammer, Mike Baker, Sean Spicer. And I want to ask you, too, what is the State of the Union? What word would you use to define it? We can all feel it, but what word would you use? We all know there's 8 million illegal immigrants who have come into this country since Biden took over. It's more than the population of 36 states. And then there's the 1.8 million known gotaways. Right, so what about the unknown gotaway? Ask the family of Laken Riley, who, by the way, he did not invite to the State of the Union. But ask them about the State of the Union when it comes to immigration. Inflation's still super high, of course. The rates have not dropped down. Listen, there'll be so much spin tonight. You'll hear Biden say something like, inflation's going down or something, or prices are dropping. It's like, no, they're not. No end in sight to another forever war in Ukraine. I mean, what else do we want? How about the state of our military? The other day on the radio show, we were talking to the former head of the VA. He was the Undersecretary of Military Readiness. And he was talking about how woke the military is and why recruitment's so down among legacy recruits, people who are 3rd, 4th, 5th generation military because they don't want to join a woke military. And he's like, yeah, that's being run by people with no military experience. I was like, what are you talking about, people with no military experience? What do you mean? How can someone be running the military with no military experience? He's like, oh yeah, the Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth has no military experience. There we got a picture. There you go. That's the Secretary of the Army right now. She has zero military experience. So the state of our military is a major problem right now. How about the head of the FBI giving hearings that the Chinese have the ability to shut down all of the infrastructure in the United States? So that's not great either. I don't think he'll bring most of those things up. You'll know he's desperate if he tries to bring the argument in that about jobs. Oh, record number of jobs under my administration. It's like, oh, that's so obvious that he's starting with the bottom job numbers because of COVID lockdowns and coming back to normal. It's not creating jobs, but if they throw that out there, you know they're out of ideas. So we know the State of the Union, but what word would you give it? How would you define it? The big question is, will the president be able to stand up there for 30 minutes? And you may remember last year, there was a moment, because it's one thing to stand there and read a teleprompter, but there was a moment last year when Biden had said something, and there was about a minute of jeers from the Republicans. And Joe Biden had to kind of like catch the ball and like throw it back, and then there was like a thing right there. And he bumbled that even. He said something like, oh, no, I love the conversion. Like, I think he meant to say conversation, right? So he like bumbled that. But we'll see if there's ever a moment like that that could be noteworthy. The New York Times wrote a funny article the other day. They went out in search of the Joe Biden superfan. They found a few. And the headline is funny. Joe Biden superfans think the rest of America's lost its mind. And there's a great line in there, and I can't wait to ask Mike Baker about this, former CIA guy, about this, because one of the people said, oh, I just love, one guy said, I love Biden because he's so friendly to train conductors. That was that's what they got. I love Joe. He's friendly to train conductors. That's like one of the top reasons. I think the guy even led with that one. And then ended with, the way he's navigated international crises with his deep foreign policy experience. Are you kidding me? We'll talk to Mike about that one in a little bit here. We do have a little insight into Biden's play, not just tonight, but for the next few months until November. It's all about January 6th. That's it. It's January 6th. And Trump is a threat to democracy. Biden's top campaign advisor, who's been his number one guy since 1981, he said, all the pollsters are telling me to go with the economy, or all the advisors are telling me to do this other stuff. But he said, no, we are going with democracy is in peril. You have to vote for Joe Biden to save the soul of the nation. That's it. That's going to be the next, until November. That's the play. January 6th, on repeat, nonstop. So we'll see how he handles that tonight. And if how he'll refer to you. If you need to vote for him to save the soul of the nation, what does that make you exactly? Our State of the Union preview. And of course, we're going to bring the State of the Union to you at 9 o'clock Eastern right here. We got Sean Spicer, Josh Hammer, and next, Mike Baker, host of the number one podcast, The President's Daily Brief, right here on the First TV.
Let's also come together on immigration. Make it a bipartisan issue once again. If we don't pass my comprehensive immigration reform, at least pass my plan to provide the equipment and officers to secure the border. And a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, those on temporary status, farm workers, essential workers. Here in the People's House, it's our duty to protect all the people's rights and freedoms.
We'll see what he says tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on the First TV with this year's State of the Union address. Want to go right to Mike Baker, host of the number one podcast, President's Daily Brief, former CIA covert operations officer. Mr. Baker, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Really good to talk to you. I want to get to the border in just a moment, but first, we mentioned in the opening monologue here, there was a New York Times article about the die-hard Biden superfans, right? They found a couple of them. And one of them said he loves Joe Biden because of the way He navigates international crises with his deep foreign policy experience. That was a real life sentence that someone said and the New York Times wrote down. What's your assessment on his deep foreign policy experience and how he's been navigating international crises?
Yeah, that was plagiarism, because that wasn't somebody's comment. So either the New York Times wrote that down and handed it to them and asked them to please repeat it so they wouldn't get caught out. Somebody wrote that. I've heard that same comment from the White House many times. So yeah, you can't even begin to imagine the difficulty of walking the streets of New York and finding someone who could string a sentence like that together.
Navigating international crises with deep foreign policy experience. What a joke that is. So name one. What is one of his biggest failures international crisis-wise that he probably won't bring up tonight?
Well, I go back to, like Bob Gates has said it, and then it got repeated numerous times, that in his opinion, Joe Biden's been on the wrong side of every foreign policy decision throughout his career. And I know he loves to tout his experience, but he's been a politician for 147 years. So I guess you gotta toot your own horn if you've been able to survive that long. But if you look at, okay, I'm gonna try to be as fair as possible. If I look at Ukraine and the conflict there, the administration has done a good job of, using his term, navigating the complexity of holding an alliance together, but only up to a point, right? Because NATO was going to do what NATO was going to do anyway, because it's right on their doorstep. So they've got much more of a physical reaction and concern to Russia's military adventurism. So you can't stand around and pat yourself on the back for saying I held together this great alliance against Ukraine, because at the same time, the Biden administration is wavering, and I know that they'll blame the Republicans, but it's the entire political system in Washington, D.C. that's wavering on further support to Ukraine. So, again, you got to kind of strike a balance, and I'm always one to try to say, look, you got to shout out and give credit where credit's due, because administrations change, and you're going to want the same treatment of your own administration down the road. But I'm not a fan of Joe Biden's foreign policy. I think he's been very weak on China, and I think that's a significant problem. And I think that there's no indication that he's going to toughen that up over the remaining year that he's got. Maybe 4 years if he wins the next election. I don't want to think about that.
No. One last thing about Ukraine. How up are you on this drama that the White House invited Zelensky, the president of Ukraine's wife, and then also invited, what was the name of that Russian guy that died in prison? They invited his wife, and they both declined, or what happened there?
Yeah, no, there was an invitation extended. Alexei Navalny's widow, Yulia, and also an invitation, obviously, to Zelensky. I can't speak to really Navalny's, reasons for declining, but I think for Zelensky, it was fairly straightforward. He's got a very difficult job trying to convince the U.S. government to continue providing resources. It's an existential threat if the U.S. doesn't continue doing that, meaning that without U.S. Weapon systems and resources, he can't win. He's not going to win this war of attrition. Even though the EU, NATO is continuing to provide assistance, it won't matter down the road. He can't win a war of attrition with Russia, and he knows that. So I think declining the invitation from Biden was more about trying to walk the line between Republicans and Democrats, and particularly in an election year, so that he can try, if possible, to get both sides to get on board with further resources.
Yeah. Let's go back to the border now. So I think you would think he would avoid it, because this is the worst of all of his issues and everyone's against everything he's done with the border. But they're still trying politically to try to spin this around as the Democrats are the champions and the Republicans aren't doing what they're supposed to do. So I think he'll bring it up tonight here in a little bit and spin it again as the Republicans are the ones to blame here. I have my own, everyone's got their own angles on the worst part of the border. You, as a former CIA guy, What do you see as the biggest problem with our open borders?
Yeah, but the biggest problem from my perspective is security, without a doubt. Look, again, yes, is the immigration, system here in the U.S. is it not what it could be? Could it be fairer? Of course, they can work on that. They can multitask, but you can't have national security. You can't have public security without a tight border, without a secure border, without knowing who's coming across. That's why you have border control, right? So that you know who's entering your country. And Joe Biden's comment that you played at the top of this from 2023, where he said, here in the people's house, our job is to protect all peoples. No, it's not. It's to protect U.S. citizens. That's your job as a government, just like it's the Mexican government's job to protect Mexican citizens. And, the same for the Brits. It's not rocket science. So quit thinking that you're here to protect all peoples of the world. Your first and foremost job is to protect and concern yourself with national security concerns for U.S. citizens, public security for U.S. citizens. And you cannot do that if you don't know who's coming across your border.
That would apply America first, and we can't have that. I got another foreign policy question. The Houthis has been in the news a lot lately, and I thought of you because I first read a report that the Houthis were working on their underwater diving capability. I'm like, what? What's that? And even underwater drones. Like, that's bizarre. And it turned out, like a week later, they cut internet cables underwater in the Red Sea. What do you know about this and further disruptive capabilities that even the stinking Houthis have in Yemen?
Yeah, the Houthis have that because of Iran. So I think it's always important. I know some people go after me for, constantly saying the Iranian-backed Houthis or the Iranian-backed Hamas or the Iranian-backed Hezbollah. But it's important to understand where all this instability comes from. And it comes from the Iranian regime and the IRGC and the Quds Force, which the Quds Force is basically focused on overseas activities for the Iranian regime to further their objectives. So the Houthis are sponsored, trained, resourced by the Iranian regime. And that's what allows them to, launch upwards of 45 attacks on commercial shipping. And now, in the second instance of this, sabotaging underwater telecoms cables and internet cables, which has a massively disruptive effect, right? Because, and I know a lot of people are thinking like, how does that work? Why are there undersea cables, that the Houthis can get a hold of? Well, you've got the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden. You've got to connect the world. And so, the underwater cable issue has always been a concern, but, in terms of sabotage and terrorist attacks. But, the Houthis are some of the first to demonstrate just how disruptive it can be. They've single-handedly, again, through the largesse of the Iranian regime, disrupted massively the global economy through the disruption of commercial shipping. And that has caused a significant problem. It impacts everything. It impacts eventually the pricing on your grocery store shelves. And we haven't done anything really to deter it. We've had a handful of counterstrikes against Houthi facilities. But that's exactly what the Iranian regime expected. That's why they've built this web of proxies that essentially surround Israel, by the way, because their ultimate objective is the destruction of Israel, and to ensure that they are the leading power in the Middle East. But we haven't done anything to deter the Iranian regime, and they anticipate and expect that their proxies will take the hits, just like Hamas. The Iranian-backed Hamas expects dead Palestinians, right? When they engage in conflict with Israel, that's what I hate to say this because it sounds really awful, but it's what they count on. So the Iranian regime counts on us striking at the Houthis in this instance, and they don't care. So that's why nothing changes.
Yep, and I doubt this will even come up tonight. What could possibly be spun in a positive for Biden on this one? We got to go, Mike, but how would you describe the State of the Union? The State of the Union is what?
Well, it's two conflicting things. I think America is very resilient. And I think American citizens are very resilient, ultimately, when faced with crisis. But at the same time as I think I'd use the word resilient, I'm not talking about the State of the Union. I think the current State of the Union is problematic, both on the domestic front and in our foreign policy dealings right now, and the state of the world. And the state of the world is chaotic because we're not leading with strength. And, we've got a pretty good track record of showing that when we do demonstrate strength and consistency and clear messaging in our foreign policy, we have fewer hotspots and crises overseas. I'm sure there's people going, no, that's not true. The State of the Union's really good. I agree with you, Mike. I don't know what he's going to do. How is he going to use up all that time when he can't really? I mean, he will. He'll blow smoke up of most of America's backside, talking about how strong the economy is and how he just wants to secure the border, but the Republicans won't let him. We're doing everything we can to support Israel, but within reason. I don't know how he's going to use up his time without just spending it all standing there blaming Republicans and trying to convince people that everything's good and give him 4 more years, at which point he'll be 86 or so.
Unbelievable. No, it'll be a masterclass of spin. It always is. They're good at it, no question. Mike Baker, President's Daily Brief Podcast. It's number 1. Listen to it every day. Mike, good to talk to you, brother.
Thank you, man. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Appreciate you. Keep up the great work. Josh Hammer, host of The Josh Hammer Show and America on Trial with Josh Hammer right here on the First TV. We'll be here next. State of the Union coverage right now, and we'll carry it for you live, 9 o'clock Eastern, right here on the First TV.
We have to uphold the rule of law and restore trust in our institutions of democracy. And we must give hate and extremism in any form no safe harbor. Democracy must not be a partisan issue. It's an American issue. Every generation of Americans has faced a moment where they have been called to protect our democracy, defend it, stand up for it. And this is our moment.
All this democracy talk, you're going to hear a ton about that tonight as well. 9 o'clock Eastern right here on First TV. You can watch the State of the Union. Josh Hammer, senior editor-at-large Newsweek, host of The Josh Hammer Show, and the new-ish America on Trial with Josh Hammer podcast right here on the First TV. Josh, how you doing, sir?
Mike, I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to join you, my friend.
The democracy, that's their new thing. We did a segment the other day about Joe Biden's big, his long time since 1981, campaign strategist, and he's like, no matter what the pollsters are telling me to talk about X, Y, or Z, we're going all in on democracy, democracy, democracy. Why? What's the play here, and how is that going to work?
Well, I think the play is that they're going to start blaring the airwaves with footage of January 6, 2021, and trying to make the argument that the other guy, Donald Trump, is a unique historic threat to capital O-R, capital D, democracy, trademark sign affixed at the end. Here's the problem, Mike, and a little bit of a preview. I wrote my syndicated column this week on this very topic, so look tomorrow at Newsweek and a host of other places to read it. They are dead set against democracy. It is, in fact, one of the greatest ironies of our modern political age that the literal party who has purportedly given their name or taken the name from democracy, the Democratic Party, every which way you look, they stand against democracy. I mean, back when I learned what democracy was, Mike, back in elementary school, you learned that democracy comes from the Greek word demos, which means the people, rule by the people, consent of the governed, all these great concepts that all Americans once agreed upon as much as they liked eating apple pie and, cheating a little on their income tax returns. But at some point, the Democratic Party has become a viciously anti-democracy partisan vehicle. How else to explain this unprecedented lawfare attempt to deprive Donald Trump from merely being on the ballot? A ruse and a gambit that just lost 9-0 at the United States Supreme Court, as we covered at great length on America on Trial. How else to explain this sprawling lawfare apparatus, the federal prosecutions from Jack Smith, the prosecution in Georgia, the prosecution in New York? all of the civil lawsuits, including this $464 million judgment in New York State. This is all part of a unique and historic anti-democratic operation against the current president. But it doesn't actually stop with Donald Trump. Look at what happened after the Dobbs abortion opinion was leaked at the U.S. Supreme Court in May 2022. They were protesting viciously outside of the center-right Supreme Court justices' homes. You had one lunatic fly from California to Maryland with the stated intention of trying to murder Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, talk about trying to deny democracy. Speaking of the Supreme Court, you had Keith Olbermann, the absolute loonbag, who after the Trump versus Anderson case on Monday at the court said it's time to dissolve the United States Supreme Court. Are you kidding me? I mean, what could be more anti-democracy than calling for the dissolution of one of the three co-equal branches of government? So it's a total ruse. They are lying through their teeth. I guess it poll tests well, according to one of their idiot K Street consulting class pollsters. The American people are not going to buy it, though, Mike.
Yeah, that's the question. That's very interesting. What do you think most people feel when they hear, not the people watching the First TV right now before the State of the Union, but like, I don't know what's normally on TV on ABC on Thursdays at 9, but whoever's tuning into that show and is going to be annoyed that the State of the Union is on, so like, I wanted to watch my shows tonight. When they hear democracy's under attack, what are they like scared of? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what are they thinking that even means?
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I mean, when most people hear democracy, which is not a word we use honestly very frequently, in part, I mean, not to kind of beat the bush too much, but America's not technically a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, and that is actually an important distinction. But I think when most people hear the term democracy, they probably think of their constitutional liberties, probably think of free speech, freedom of religion, your Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures, your Sixth Amendment rights to a speedy trial, and so on there. But, you know, I mean, is anyone truly worried that America is going to turn into a Third Reich era fascist state? I mean, it's really ludicrous, honestly. I mean, you know, back in 2015, 2016, there were a lot of people who were complaining about how Donald Trump spoke and how he did this and that. He presided, I should say, for 4 years of a roaring economy of great stability, frankly, on the world stage, historically low black unemployment, the lowest that rate ever was in the history of the Gallup poll, really no major wars overseas. You know, if that's democracy looking like it's at risk, then I guess sign me up for that, because it was pretty good for those 4 years, and hopefully we get it again, I think.
Yeah, Merrick Garland the other day was in Selma, Alabama at a black church saying the right to vote is under attack. And is specifically talking about voter ID laws, photo ID, which 60% of Democrats support even. But the idea that the left would say the right to vote is under attack, as they literally are trying to make it so you can't even vote for a person. That's unbelievable. And they get away with that, and we'll see what they do tonight. But that's their big thing. And you mentioned freedom, or our freedoms, liberty. That's one of Joe Biden's favorite new lines now. I think he used it in Valley Forge. The freedom to marry who you want, the freedom of choice, meaning abortion, freedom to go to church and not worry that you're going to be killed by a weapon of war. So that's how they're spinning the freedom to become like the people of freedom, the party of freedom. Are people going to buy that?
Look, I mean, some people might buy that. I mean, look, if you are someone who is sympathetic to, you know, your quote unquote freedom to kill your unborn child in the womb up until 20, 25 weeks, and maybe you'll buy that argument. But I don't think most people are going to buy it. I mean, look, the American people, Mike, are voting with their feet when it comes to the dueling conceptions of freedom that are playing out right now in America. You have the red state model of governance and you have the blue state model of governance. We actually watched this debate quite literally when Ron DeSantis debated Gavin Newsom a few months ago. They literally had kind of the red state model versus blue state model debate.
Yes.
And the stats speak for themselves. As DeSantis correctly pointed out over and over again to Gavin Newsom, California is losing citizens. This past census, California lost people for the first time since California became a state. And Gavin Newsom has been doing the exact same thing, saying, oh, your freedom to do this, your freedom to do that is under siege. Come here to California. Mike, people are literally trying to find U-Haul trucks to get them out of California. The U-Haul company literally ran out of trucks to take people out of the Golden State in the last year for which we have data, which I believe is 2022. So you have this other conception of freedom, which is, prudentially limit the size and scope of government, keep our taxes reasonably low, keep us free from COVID tyranny and things like that. And then you have this other conception of quote unquote freedom, which means let homelessness run rampant, violent crime, property crime are going to threaten your communities, threaten your church, threaten your way of life there. And again, when you look at the literal trends as to where people are moving, it's states like Florida, Texas, the Carolinas, Tennessee that are gaining people. States like California, Illinois, New York, Connecticut, and so forth are tremendously losing people. So the American people are speaking with their own literal voting patterns and where they are moving to. And unfortunately, the Democrats' conception of freedom, unfortunately for them, is quite literally on the decline nationwide.
Yeah, we got about 30 seconds. How would you answer the question? The State of the Union is?
I think the State of the Union is decadent. We are dealing with a major political party that is spending like drunken sailors. They are spending ruinously, abetted, I should say, by no small number of squishy Republicans as well. But all of these so-called social issues when it comes to anti-racism, the woke nonsense, DEI, the transgender stuff, the gender ideology, this is late Roman Republic style stuff, Mike. Healthy functioning republics don't go there. Unfortunately, America is currently going there all too often, although really it's only one party that's leading the church.
You're so right. America on trial with Josh Hammer. I'm telling everyone, there's no place better to go for all the coverage and to make sense of all of this lawfare, which I would argue is the most important thing happening in our country right now, and the place to go and make sense of it all and be smarter than anyone you know. There's no question. America on Trial with Josh Hammer. Josh, great to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
And Josh is the first person we turn to whenever there's anything related to any of this lawfare stuff. Because there'll be like a ruling that comes out or whatever, and I'm like, wait, which case is like, so many charges of everything. There's like 900 years in prison. He's basically like, which one is that about? Oh yeah, that's this. And Josh is the one that always makes sense of it better than anyone. Hey, we got the State of the Union coming up 9 o'clock Eastern right here on the First TV. Sean Spicer, who's been there before, will be here next. Mike Slater, First TV, spread the word.
Also tomorrow, the president will deliver his first address to both houses of Congress. In his speech, the president will lay out an optimistic vision for the country, crossing traditional lines of party, race, and socioeconomic status. As I said before, the theme will be the renewal of the American spirit.
There he was. That's Sean Spicer, back when he worked at the White House, and here he is now when he works for the First TV. Sean Spicer, how you doing, sir?
Well, thanks for that stroll down memory lane.
Right? How many years ago was that now?
That's 7 years ago. Yeah.
Whoa.
I don't even know what to make of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Take us back. Take us back to the days before the State of the Union address. When you guys were crafting it, who were you talking to?
I will tell you, in all the time I had been with Trump up into that, from the campaign through the transition, that was at that moment, the single proudest moment that I had in terms of creating a really team-focused, comprehensive product. We had a ton of hands in it. We would sit in the map room and go over versions. We had set up a podium with teleprompter that he could read off of that would be simulated what he would see at the rostrum in there in the House. I have pictures that I posted on Instagram of going over versions with him. He was very interested in every detail. He had thoughts and ideas and statistics. Honest to God, going back now, even thinking of this, and I remember riding with him to the Capitol, riding with him back, and then we went up to the residence. And I was I remember looking at my phone saying, this is David Axelrod's response to you. This is Van Jones, all extremely complimentary. That was one of the best efforts that I had seen him put forward since I had gotten to work with him, which is a great thing for Trump, but it's also a reminder, Mike, that it's a speech. And yes, you put a lot of time and effort and get a lot of input. It's probably the one that goes across more offices and has more input than anything else. But again, let's be fair. It's a speech. You stand in a stationary position and read off a teleprompter for 35, 40 minutes. And the reason I bring this up is that tonight, that's where the bar is. Can the leader of the free world stand in the same place for 30, 35 minutes and read a speech without falling down or creating a massive gaffe. I mean, think about where the bar is as we head into tonight.
Yeah, it's funny because let's say he makes it, right? Let's say he's able to actually do that. There'll be so many people across the country that'll say, oh, he's fine. He's great. All that Republican stuff is overblown about his health and fitness. Look, he just stood up there for 30 minutes.
I joked, by the way, earlier today, I put out a tweet and I said the White House has announced 2 intermissions today for the State of the Union. And people are literally replying and saying, is this true? That's where we are, that they might actually believe that there's an intermission that's going to happen tonight.
So that being said, are you surprised that they're even doing one?
No, look, in terms of his mental acuity and his physical frailness, he balked at doing that Super Bowl interview, which, let's face it, was a layup. I get their concerns. Don't get me wrong. I get why they didn't do it. It's one thing to give a speech and to stand in the same place. It's another thing to interact with a reporter who, granted, is basically like a staff member. But at the end of the day, there was too many risks and so I think if they didn't do this today, they would be facing questions even from a loving and affectionate press corps that they have. So, they had to do this. But it's such a controlled environment. I do think that 9 o'clock at night is pretty late to go if you're Joe Biden. I mean, that's way past your bedtime.
Yeah, no joke. I mean, you say that, but no joke. Yes, super controlled, but last year there was that moment when he said something about what Republicans are doing, and there was like a minute of jeering from the Republicans, and Joe had to kind of come back. There was like a little bit of I got to catch the ball and throw it back moment that he butchered. He said something like, "Oh no, I love the conversion." But he meant to say conversation or something. But so there could be some of that he's not prepared for.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, look, I think tonight is going to be a suspension of reality. One, I think you're right. What's that moment? Because I think Republicans, unfortunately, and I'm not a big fan of this at the State of the Union. I do still respect the office. Let him give his speech, and then we get our response and go on. But the reality is there's somebody that's going to say something tonight. I mean, if you want to go make a bet somewhere online, I think you're pretty safe that you'll win that one. How he reacts, to your point, is going to be huge because once he stops reading the teleprompter, that's when the staff goes into fetal position mode and it's like, please don't say anything, please don't say anything. But I do think that tonight is going to be. We've seen the excerpts and the themes get pushed out by Chief of Staff Jeff Zients, who's talking about that they're going to blame Republicans for the process of the border. They're going to remind people of what the economy looked like before Biden. And I'm like, really? Low interest rates, low unemployment, low inflation, a secure border, energy security. I mean, I cannot believe that they're basically going to just try to pretend that these are not the droids you're looking for, to quote Star Wars.
Yeah, no, gosh, it's going to be so frustrating to watch, and especially try to put the spin on the border and not be able to respond immediately. That's going to be brutal. Take us back to, again, what you first said about working with Trump. So how much of a hand did he have in the overall messaging and the details of his speech? Because I would assume next to none. Not that against him, but just, there's speeches all the time. There's speech writers for that reason. So how much of a play did he have?
On a normal speech, people learn his voice and they put it together and he'd go over it if he was going out and giving a speech to an organization or a group or what have you. He was intimately involved in this, intimately. I mean, I have pictures of the drafts that he would go through and say, I don't like this, I want to add this, let's get this statistic. I mean, we were locked in a room. We had the different policy advisors, legal counsel, congressional affairs, all giving him feedback. He would give us feedback. I want this changed. I want this updated. Insert that stat. Here's a story that I want to tell. I want to point to this guest in the gallery. That's why I was saying it was one of my proudest moments of the White House, because the team worked together better than ever before. He laid out a vision that really was him. It was not a speech written that was handed to him. This was his voice, his vision, his agenda, and it showed.
Gosh, that's really interesting. I always love the drafting and editing process. Like FDR, it was a day that will live forever or something, and they cross it out and wrote infamy.
I'll tell you, there was I'll have to recall it entirely, but basically there was a bunch of attacks on Jewish community centers in the weeks leading up to this. And I sat down with the president. I said, Mr. President, there's a lot of people. I've been getting a lot of questions in the briefing room about this. I think maybe at the beginning we start off by addressing these concerns and how your administration is taking this seriously. And that's what is so amazing. I grew up a working class kid from Rhode Island. And I'm in the map room with the president of the United States talking about how he should address not just the nation, Mike, but the world. And it will always go down as a moment that I treasure because of that.
Yeah, it's great. Do you think, and I'm not meaning to insult Joe here, but do you think Joe is as intimately involved in his speech tonight?
I think it depends, and I'm not being facetious. I think it depends on the meaning of intimately involved. I think that the people that have been around him, Mike Donnellan, Bruce Reed, Anita Dunn, they've been around him forever. I think they know what he should say, and I think he trusts them. So he, in his version of reality, they're giving him a product that he's good with. I don't know that he's crossing stuff out like Trump did and making changes and adding things. I think he might say, can you add something here? But I think there's a very big difference between how he defines intimately involved and how you and I might define that.
30 seconds. The State of the Union is what?
In peril. If you look at what's happening domestically at our southern border, I think it's very concerning. The idea that fentanyl, trafficking, terrorism, other crime is coming in through our country. I know that the folks on MSNBC, my successor, Jen Psaki, and Joy Reid, and everyone mocked immigration as an issue in my state here in Virginia. There was a Venezuelan that raped a 14-year-old girl. That's nothing to laugh about, nothing to mock. And I think if one side of the country politically doesn't understand that that's an issue, it concerns me. Secondly, I do worry about the threats that we face abroad, whether it's Iran, North Korea, China, even Russia, that we don't have the stature that we did 4 years ago under President Trump. They respected him, they feared him. And it doesn't take much these days to go to war, which is a very scary thought. And so I think we need to make a course correction really quickly this November.
Sean Spicer, host of the Sean Spicer Show right here on the First TV. Sean, great to talk to you as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Love that insight. All right, here it is. State of the Union tonight, right here. First TV. Thanks for watching our pre-show.